you so much for having me today. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all and grateful to be here. I'll do just a brief introduction of myself, and then I'd really like to invite folks either to come off of mute or in the chat, let us know about you, because I really want to make sure that my talk is relevant to the types of work that you're doing in our meeting today. So my name is Billy McCarthy. I'm the Food Safety Project Manager at the National Farmers Union. National Farmers Union is a membership organization. We have 33 state divisions across the US that focus on policy, education, and cooperation amongst farmers and supporting family farmers and ranchers across the country. My specific role in the project that we work on, we have a cooperative agreement with the FDA to focus on food safety best practices, especially for smaller scale producers, producers from underserved communities, or that might get overlooked by the rather large machinery of enforcement and oversight, but still would benefit both to them on their operation and in the food system, a safer, more robust food system. In addition to all that, I am a small farmer myself. My wife and I run Crooked Fence Farm in northern Baltimore County, Maryland. We are a small scale diversified operation. So we grow produce, cut flowers. We have a flock of sheep and a couple of beehives. And we have also done processed foods and pork in the past. So I try to really bring, my perspective as both a educator and technical assistance provider, but also the fact that I've got a lot of mistakes and challenging situations under my belt in 9+ years of farming. So I hope that that can make it a little bit relevant to y'all and what I'm going to talk about today in terms of using the food safety, both mandatory and voluntary certifications and audits, oversight, however you want to frame it, to actually be a boon to your business and help you connect with buyers and new markets. With all that said, no pressure, but if anyone wants to share in the chat or just give a brief hello and tell me what kind of growing, production, processing that you're doing on your farm or operation, that would be really helpful, so I understand a little bit of who I'm talking to and what parts of my presentation I can really highlight for y'all.
Hi, I'm Haley Bradley. I just moved to Illinois about a year ago from Austin, Texas, where I helped run a co-op that aggregated produce from small scale producers. It folded shortly after COVID for a variety of reasons. So I'm just getting started up here, learning how to grow things in a drastically different zone. Hoping to focus on natives and eliminating invasives, especially, along with specialty herbs and fruits.
Wonderful.
And I'm in Schaumburg.
Hello, I'm Glenda George Green. We're in Northwest Indiana. We're Baby Green's family farm. We grow, specialize in microgreens, and we're expanding currently into hydroponic lettuce as well. But we also love growing outdoors. We're in partnership with a church in Gary, Indiana, and to grow on an acre of land. So I'm here and I thank you for doing this. I also do this with my sons who are very actively a part in every aspect of learning business development and doing it as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Leave just a few more moments for folks to chime in if you want. Again, no pressure. We're not going to put anyone on the spot, but just from the few things that I've heard already, it helps me to hone in a little bit on some of the aspects of the slides that I put together here. And it's just always really exciting to meet and hear the diversity of growers and operations that are out there um, across the country. Stacy, it looks like you might be ready to share.
Yeah, I'm ready. Hi, I'm Stacy McCaskill. I'm the owner of Hempstock Farms. We're a seed to label hemp farm in Woodstock, Illinois. And thinking about looking at expanding into some other production specialty crops besides hemp.
Cool. I'm just curious, Stacey. I'll stay on it for a moment because it's honestly a blind spot in my production knowledge. Are you doing hemp for fiber, for any sort of seed oil?
We're a cannabinoid hemp farm, seed to label cannabinoid hemp farm. We make 70 plus products on the farm. Topicals, tinctures, edibles, smokables, drinkables, veterinary.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I would imagine there's a fair amount of oversight in that industry, or standards you have to meet.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get into it because it is really very complicated landscape. Yeah.
It's complicated enough when you're just talking about tomatoes and cucumbers. So I can
Right.
just imagine when you're talking about a specialty consumable crop. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I guess what I would recommend anybody that's just doing specialty crops to avoid doing hemp. It just really gums up your other stuff. Makes getting all your like food production, your licenses, all that kind of stuff, it really complicates it significantly. So I wouldn't add it lightly if you already have a successful operation going.
You have to be really interested and dedicated, it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, kind of going once, going twice on personal introductions, but I'll just say if there's a aspect of my talk that's not getting enough attention, or you see something in my slides that you want to know more about, feel free to stop and ask a question, or I'll definitely leave a lot of time for specific Q&A afterwards.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll go real quick. My name is McCarthy. I'm part of a collective called the Inglewood Village Farming Collective. I'm also a farmer with a small production farm called Sisters in a Village. And we grow your typical vegetables, some indigenous crops, and of the African diaspora. So thank you. I'm in Chicago, South Side, in the community called.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
One more, Billy. This is me, Carmen. And I just, how's it going? And how's everyone else today? It's beautiful in Illinois, especially in the Chicago suburban area. I am a trainer. I do work with the FSMA on terms of getting farmers, small farmers, in terms of mostly urbans, understanding the process in terms of safety. I run a small little organization called It's All Natural. And what I do is in my communities, my township has 13 cities in it, and we have a lot of growers. And what I do is try to train them using FSMA's format in terms of how to produce things more ethically, in terms of not just going out in your backyard growing something, go and open up a farm stand and not go through the procedures in terms of safety of what you're growing. I am growing herbs for medical reasons and for my community. I am producing through the University of Illinois some produce that we give to our community, churches, and food banks. I'm interested in your program because you're on a much larger scale when it comes to food safety and in terms of understanding what goes on from field, also in the field, to the final product of actually shipping and moving that particular product. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to see you. I'm waiting to hear what you got to say.
Very good. Well, I think that's a great invitation to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Sure, I got the right slides. There we are. And full screen, so you don't have to look at all the menus and stuff. As I said, I'm Billy McCarthy. I'm from the National Farmers Union. I actually forgot to include my slide, and I'm kind of regretting it, but it seems like there's some interest from folks, and I did want to highlight. Local Food Safety Collaborative is working in 14 or 15 states across the country, including we did some events in Indiana and Illinois just earlier this winter, back in January and February. But we work across the country, New York all the way over to California and north to south as well. Just from some of the things that I heard that folks shared, and I do encourage you to go check out nfu.org and our food safety page. There's a whole section of links at the back of this talk. For the folks that are doing medicinals or herbs, we're working with some partners down in Carolinas, the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. They are creating an entire new curriculum on the safe production and handling of farm or cottage scale herb production and medicinal production. And that's the project that they're working on with us this year. So that handbook and that curriculum is going to be available, I would probably guess, late spring 2025. But keep up with us. Check our webpage and social media for access to that. A couple of our states, as I mentioned, Farmers Union has a big emphasis on cooperatives and connecting growers to cooperatives or creating grower cooperatives. For instance, our colleagues over at the Montana Farmers Union are working on a project scaling up food safety best practices for cooperatively owned food enterprises across the Mountain West. We also work, as some folks mentioned, at a national scale. We work with the Produce Safety Alliance, which is one of the premier food safety education organizations in the US. But we also work straight down to one-on-one with farmers all across the country, everywhere from Alabama, Kansas, Missouri, out in New Mexico, as I mentioned, California. So check out our page. My full contact info also is in the back of this presentation. I'm always happy to answer direct questions and individual questions you might have about your organization or your operation. All right, let's get into this here. So what I wanted to start with was, in my sense, kind of a nice umbrella of the food safety education, certifications, mandatory, voluntary audits, oversight that's out there, and why they might be relevant to your farm, your greenhouse operation, your cottage food operation. That's why I was really asking what folks are growing and what they're making, just so that we can kind of get a sense of the landscape. So I just mentioned the Produce Safety Alliance, and a little bit of history for those that don't know. The Food Safety Modernization Act was passed, I believe, in the second Obama administration. This is the first major update, especially when it comes to food safety, to the Clean Food and Drug Act since 1938. So it's quite a big overhaul and long overdue in some folks' minds to change the landscape of food safety in the US. And what the Food Safety Modernization Act did was it created these baskets of farm and food operations for oversight. And I would venture to guess that 99% of the folks that I work with do not actually have mandatory oversight or inspections by under the produce safety rule, the Food Safety Modernization Act. That's because farms that are quote unquote covered by that have to sell $500,000 a year in product, and it has to be to a distributor or a wholesaler. If it's direct to consumer or at a farmer's market, there are exemptions. And if you are interested in the minutia, I have plenty of slides that I'm happy to share after the talk about what qualifies as a covered farm that's going to get inspected by the FDA or your state Department of Ag. But again, those buckets of sales dollars and your end user, as they call it, often don't meet the criteria for the majority of the farmers in the U.S. And the majority of the farmers that we at National Farmers Union work with. All of that being said, the Produce Safety Alliance was stood up because there is a mandatory training for farms that are covered under the Produce Safety Rule, and it's a grower training curriculum. And regardless of if you're, have any sort of mandatory oversight under the Produce Safety Rule, it's a one-day classroom setting. You can also get it remote online learning. And it's a really great overview of all of the different aspects of food safety on the farm. So worker training, food safety planning, use of water, wildlife, and potential foreign contaminants coming into or onto your farm, as well as washing, packing, handling, and distribution. So I often recommend, it's usually pretty accessible. A lot of State Department of Ag or Extension offices will have subsidies for growers to attend those types of trainings, and it's a relatively low time commitment. So even if you're not required to do it, I find it as a good crash course in making sure that you understand what the food safety dimensions are, specifically if you're a produce or a microgreen farm. The Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance, which I believe actually is based out of Illinois Tech, just fun fact there, is for food processors and manufacturers. This is also under the umbrella of the Food Safety Modernization Act. Again, this is a mandatory certification if you work in or are the owner operator of a large food production facility, processing, manufacturing. Again, the majority of folks that we're working with are not doing that scale or style. But if you're interested in the science and the technical management of food production, in kind of a controlled kitchen or sorry, what am I trying? Like a packing line style production, it is a very strong course. It's quite technical. I'm working on getting my certification there, and it can be really helpful, especially if you are considering doing any sort of value added or processed food. There are, of course, exceptions and exemptions for on-farm or cottage scale producers, which we'll get into a little bit later. But again, this is a FDA regulated course that will get you a certificate at the end and is very valuable to have. Gap audit, I put that right in the middle because while this is a fully voluntary standard, is often the most useful standard for a lot of the growers that I'm working with, a lot of the producers that I'm working with. GAP stands for Good Agricultural Practices. There are multiple versions of the audit, including if you work in a cooperative setting, like let's say you're working with multiple producers, there's a group GAP. There's harmonized GAP, which also links up with some of the standards under the Produce Safety Rule and Food Safety Modernization Act, as well as international or third-party auditor standards. That gets a little bit technical. That's also, again, for those mid to larger scale growers. But what GAP is really helpful for is, while food safety is a big part of it, it's also good agricultural practices. So it helps you have a lot of understanding around your whole business organization and management. And as it says here in the slide, you need to voluntarily opt into it. You will end up being audited by either the USDA, your state Department of Ag, or a third-party auditor, depending on your local conditions and what the requirements are in your state. For instance, here in Maryland, the Maryland Department of Agriculture has an agreement with FDA and USDA that they'll do all the gap audits. So I don't interact with a third-party auditor or the USDA for my gap audit, but it is different state to state. I do apologize. I wasn't entirely familiar with the Illinois standards, but I'm happy to delve into that. Or if someone on the call might be more knowledgeable than I on the particulars of that, we can talk about what an audit looks like and what some of the gap standards are. But we're going to come back to that because I think it's going to be really relevant to the part about linking up with larger buyers. I did also want to flag meat, dairy, and eggs. As I mentioned, I'm a small meat producer myself, lamb and pork. Well, pork's all done on the farm, but we still do the sheep. And I have worked on multiple egg producing farms, worked a day in a dairy and decided that even for a masochistic farmer, that was too much for me. That's a tough job, but I value the folks that produce dairy in our country. Those are separate inspections and qualifications. I'm not going to delve too much into it. If you're selling your meat for retail and not direct to consumer, you do need to have it processed at a USDA inspected plant that gets a stamp on your label and sometimes a stamp directly on the meat. If you're selling like big whole cuts, that says that it's been processed in an inspected plant. There are some exemptions in there, especially for small scale poultry or really small livestock production, like rabbits. But again, that's fairly niche. I didn't hear anyone saying that they were raising chickens or rabbits. If you do have a question about those exemptions and what on-farm processing looks like, I've done that as well. I'm happy to talk about it. And eggs and dairy are pretty unique inspections and oversight requirements. So I'll only speak to those if I have a specific request to do so. And then I also wanted to highlight organic certification. We actually just had we do a food safety podcast here at NFU called the Food Safety Dish. Also encourage you to check that out. And we were speaking with one of the few organic certified retailers in the country. And while the organic certification is not a food safety certification, it does share a lot of the best practices and management outlooks, like with GAP and with the FSMA requirements that will make your operation more food safe. And if you're interested in being an organic producer, jumping through the requirements of getting the organic certification will help you have some of the paperwork and mindset and philosophy ready to hit some of these other certifications. And that's another big thing that I like to highlight with any of the farmers and growers that I'm working with is, you know, if you're keeping a record somewhere for your own purposes, for your own business management, for you know, a state or national audit or inspection that you happen to have, there's a good chance that you might be able to use it for your organic certification or for your GAP audit. And reducing the amount of paperwork that anyone has to do, but especially a busy farmer or food producer, is always a good thing in my book to help folks out with. So I like to try to highlight the overlaps between some of, especially GAP, organic, and some of the FSMA requirements. You can be efficient with your record keeping and note taking. I also just wanted to very briefly mention the world of process controls and hazard analysis, critical control point regulations. Process controls, if any of you make a jam or a jelly, and you've worked with like an ag innovation center or a communal food kitchen, if you're going to be selling a canned or jarred product out on the market, you have to have a verified process that just shows the steps of how you're making the processed food, so that it's clear that there's, you know, a safe production method. If it's heated, then there's a kill step that's getting rid of, you know, the majority of pathogens in your that are potentially in your process. You know, hopefully it's nice and clean. And hazard analysis critical control point is really only for the largest scale food processors and food production facilities, but it is a an initialism that you might hear tossed around, HACCP. And I do think it shares a lot with the food safety preventative controls curriculum and standards. It's slightly different, but if you do hear folks talking about it, it really does relate to food production and processing. All right, so that is a very brief, because I could talk in depth about a lot of these, but some of the food safety certifications that are out there, both voluntary, mandatory, as you've heard, a lot of exemptions and nuances to each one. So I'm going to keep going and also make sure I leave time for questions. Right. So the next thing, and of course, Zoom. There we go. Matching a certification with your business and goals. Zoom was covering up my slide for me there, very helpful. If you have a produce operation and you're selling mostly to retail buyers, and that means CSA, a farmer's market, direct to consumer out of a farm stand or to a local restaurant. Really what I recommend is having a basic food safety understanding and knowledge, and taking a grower training course if it's of interest and available to you. There aren't many of these standards and certifications that require you to do anything beyond that, especially if that's your primary market. And of course, you can always do organic if desired. I always encourage folks to explore making a food safety plan for your farm. One of the things that I've really learned managing our produce operation, and again, hitting that efficiency metric, if you will, a lot of the records that I was keeping of production logs, harvest logs, in and out of the cooler when stuff was getting delivered, actually translated really well to having a food safety plan and helped me find the areas in my product, like growing, harvesting, washing and packing chain, that actually became more efficient when I analyzed them from a food safety perspective. And then I had cleaner, safer produce at the end of that. Now, if you're gonna be selling to institutional buyers, and I would include in that umbrella like hospital, of course, schools, wholesale buyer, someone that's aggregating your produce, say a producers cooperative or just a local produce distributor, you are likely going to need some sort of certification, inspection, or at least some evidence that you've thought about the food safety of your operation. I think the bare minimum is that a buyer in that situation will require a food safety plan. As I just discussed, I think it's a great practice for any size and type of operation. Many institutional buyers will require a GAP audit or a particular third-party audit that might be similar to GAP. I'll give an example here, and I know that there's been some speakers earlier in the day and yesterday. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join some of those, so I may be out on some of the nuance to it. But again, I'll give an example from my home state. When the local food for schools program came into Maryland, the very first thing that they said to all the small local growers was, you're going to have to get a GAP certification to sell into the school system. That was just the first hoop that they had us jump through before there was any other discussion of getting set up as a state vendor or a county vendor. It was, do you have a GAP audit? And again, as I mentioned, in the state of Maryland, that's run by the State Department of Ag. So it was a fairly seamless process for us, but it's just good to know. Again, I think it's a very similar thing. My wife and I worked on selling to a couple of local hospitals for their local food buying programs. And again, they wanted a food safety plan. One of them wanted a GAP audit. And if you're selling to places like Whole Foods or a similar organic retailer, they're going to want an organic certification. Moving on to processed foods. If you're doing cottage production, which is really just out of your home kitchen or on-farm processing, if you have a separate space but it's on your home or farm business. You need to meet the required local and state compliance. This can always be a bit of a thorny thicket to navigate, because there can be city, county, statewide compliance requirements. I just pulled this link here from the Department of Public Health in Illinois that outlines what their requirements are around producing food for public consumption at home. And I think that was a pretty good overview. Generally, you're going to have to register somewhere and let folks know what types of food you're making and where you're selling it. You also have to have some disclosure around, being able to get in contact with you in case there's any problem with the food that you produced, or they need to do a trace back or some sort of recall. If you are going into a shared commercial kitchen, a food hub, a co-packing space that's doing commercial processing for you, you're going to have that process authority, a scheduled process that I discussed earlier. And that's literally, it's basically a fancy way of saying a recipe. Here's how we handle the food, and here's how it's going to get processed and packed to ensure the food safety. A lot of places will work with you to help develop that process authority scheduled process. And I'm happy to help connect folks to various, as I mentioned, ag innovation centers, co-packers, et cetera, that might help you do that if you're interested in that scale, because that's usually a larger volume of canned and jarred foods that are being processed. And then when you get to larger scale processing, again, I'm not certain that anyone here is going to open up a several thousand square foot facility and do tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in food processing. But if you are, you're definitely going to have to look into both the preventative controls and hazard analysis certifications for your facility, and the requirements around that. Often you have to have a dedicated person on staff that's managing your food safety. And then just very briefly on meat, eggs, and dairy. If you're doing on-farm processing of meat, particularly, you have to make sure that you qualify for exemptions, like with small meat animals such as chickens or rabbits, and egg production. Again, to give an example from my home state, I have a good friend that produces tens of thousands of eggs a year, but all she had to do was just let the State Department of Ag know that she was doing that. And she has a pretty clean wash and pack line for her egg production. But it's quite the tangle of state and local requirements, state to state, county to county. Check with extension in your area, check with your Department of Public Health or the State Department of Ag. And again, happy to lend a hand with folks that might want help navigating that. And then if you are selling into a retail market, either to a restaurant or to a consumer, or again, a wholesaler or someone that's going to distribute your meat, that has to be in a USDA inspected plant with a USDA inspection stamp. And you have to also ensure safe transport and storage of your product. Let's say you get your meat processed and then you bring it home. This is my example. This is what I do. I get my lambs processed. I bring them home. I store them in a freezer, and then I sell them to neighbors, community members, CSA members, and I have to maintain an equipment log and a temperature log that ensures that the meat that was processed and has this nice stamp from the USDA is also being stored and held at a safe temperature for meat, and that the equipment is in good working condition. Again, happy to help folks navigate the ins and outs of those, but it does need to be on a operation by operation basis. All right, so just want to make sure I'm doing okay on time here. So getting and using your certification, this is where the rubber meets the road. Number one, assess your operation. If you're an urban farm and you're growing on a 1/4 acre and you're selling at the local farmers market, as I mentioned before, you probably don't have to do anything mandatory, but you can decide, I'd like to have a GAP certification. I'd like to be organic because that'll give me more flexibility, or it'll, you know, be more attractive to my customers at the farmers market. You need to understand what your business is doing, so that you can assess what food safety measures and requirements best meet your needs. I will keep harping on this. I really do think having your operation organized, your information organized, is one of the first two initial most important steps, no matter what type of operation you're running. You'll see here, I linked to 2 resources about food safety planning. And again, these slides will all be available after the talk. You'll see that this says minimal food safety plan, because again, I want to minimize the amount of record keeping and unnecessary red tape that anyone might have to go through, but also make sure that it meets the standards and requirements and helps you have a safer and more efficient operation. Farmers Union also made a video education series, if that's more your speed. And this link, Getting Started with Your Farm's Food Safety Plan, is a video essay about a farm and how they set up their food safety plan. Then you can go get your certification. As I mentioned a number of times, and again, a lot of this information is available on our website and some of our partners' websites. There's a lot of different funding out there. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a pain to fill out a grant application, or, you know, make sure that you're up to speed on whatever the requirements are to access that funding. But from the top down, FDA and USDA have funding to get GAP and FSMA certifications. A lot of State Department of Ag will also get some of that funding and then distribute it out to the growers and producers in their states. And then there are regional and local nonprofits and support organizations that will try to defray some of those costs. And I know for a fact that there are grants to help you write your food safety plan, get your GAP audit. There's often subsidies to attend that food safety, Produce Safety Alliance food safety training. So I know that cost, certainly is for me, can be a barrier sometimes. So don't hesitate to ask, you know, folks in your network, and as well as like folks at Farmers Union or folks in our network, where that funding is. And then, you know, the most important thing is to implement and maintain. Once you've gone through an audit, once you've gone through some sort of certification, you want to make sure that you keep those practices up. It depends on each cert, but you know, some folks have unannounced audits where they'll come and just check up on you and make sure that you're still in compliance. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining those good practices. I also wanted to say, and this is a really great piece of advice that I got about writing my food safety plan, perhaps using the minimal food safety template, to make sure you write down what your operation actually does. I've seen folks that take one of the food safety plan templates and just copy it word for word, and then it doesn't actually match what they do on their farm or in their cottage food business. And then if they get an inspection or someone's auditing them, they say, well, you wrote down that you you know, wash every harvest crate before you go harvest, but you're a jam and jelly maker and you don't harvest, you know, any of your fruit. So why did you even put that in there? You know, only write down what you're going to do and what's relevant to your business. And then that comes back around to getting in with the buyers that might value these certifications. As I mentioned, there are certainly city, county, and statewide contracts. I would encourage you guys to check out, and again, I can put a link to this, the project that Montana Farmers Union worked with, I want to say, about 20 to 30 growers across the entire state of Montana. And they have a cooperative branded tomato sauce that goes into all of the state public schools now. And, you know, from grower all the way up to processor, they had to have food safety controls in place and then go get that state bid. But they have locally produced marinara sauce. It's quite the feat out in Montana. I know, as I said, that there have been some speakers talking about the local food purchase assistance program and the local food for schools program. I really would encourage you to look into that and see what's going on in your state. And I just pulled again this link here. I believe this is the Illinois school system, their document about local food for schools, what funding they have available, what the requirements are around growers that want to sell to them. Food safety certifications often also unlock selling to local and national grocery store chains, as well as food hubs and food aggregators. So I'm going to take a quick breath here and then just, hammer on the point that we've got lots and lots of resources out there, and recognize that many of you who we're going to be working with and supporting, everyone has a really unique operation. I don't think, there are many other farms here in Maryland that do produce lamb and cut flowers. It's different for every operation. Every farmer is unique and different. So we encourage you to reach out. That being said, I always encourage you to reach out to your local county extension. For instance, I found this cottage food training on Illinois Extension that I thought looked like a pretty great program. I mentioned that one of our partners is doing a full curriculum and online workshop for herbal food production. I also wanted to flag that in addition to the National Farmers Union, there's the Illinois Farmers Union active in your state, and we have I believe it's a monthly newsletter, but the link to sign up is there. I did hear some folks from Indiana as well. Encourage you to check out the Indiana Farmers Union, also active and happy to share their resources. The Food Safety Clearinghouse is a complete repository of any information that you could ever want on food safety. Let's take these hacker eye turnips here, which look beautiful and tasty on my slide. If you go to the Food Safety Clearinghouse and search for turnips, you will almost certainly find something specifically about how to have the safest, freshest turnips from harvest to someone's plate. So it really can be as specific to your operation and your needs for knowledge or management information as you want there. There's just a wealth of information at the Food Safety Clearinghouse. The FSMA education and outreach is overseen by 4 regional centers, and you guys fall in the North Central region, ncrfsma.org. They are a fantastic organization, and they are often the ones that will be able to link you to the grants and other financial resources, subsidies, cost share programs to get some of these certifications and access to food safety education or audits and things like that. And then I just wanted to link the National GAP program and the National Organic Program, because it's always useful to check out exactly what the USDA is saying about that. And then, oh gosh, I thought I had updated the slide. The Illinois Farmers Union is having their annual meeting coming up here January 28th. And I'm gonna, since I didn't get that onto the slide, I'm gonna drop the information. And since I heard some Indiana folks in the chat as well, I'll drop the information for both of those annual meetings in case you're interested in attending. It's very likely that I will be in attendance for one or both of those as well. Excuse me. And I'm just catching up with the chat, making sure that I didn't miss any questions as I was kind of bulldozing through all my slides there. Anyway, there are annual meetings, and again, just encourage you to check out the local food safety collaborative website, which I'll drop a link to in just a moment. And now I really wanted to, rather than blather on, invite folks to ask any questions or feedback to everything that I was downloading there. Open up the floor. Great. Oh,
Hi, well, I'm sorry, this is Glenda. Hi. I
hi.
wanted, I get very confused for the gaps audit
Mhm.
or trying to officially be a wholesaler.
Mm,
So I'm wanted to be clear. The issue with the wholesale is that the people buying may ask for require the GAP certification, or is there a USDA licensing to be a wholesaler along with GAPs, or is GAPs what the wholesaler needs?
yeah, gap is for the producer. There's there's a whole separate set of requirements. Let's say if you're a supermarket or a big distributor, and that does fall under the Food Safety Modernization Act standards. But you know, we almost put that out of our mind because we don't have to worry about it. They have to worry about it. They have to have someone in charge of food safety and product safety. The reason that I highlighted gaps is just because it's the most frequent um, audit that a lot of wholesalers, larger supermarket chains will require from their small growers or suppliers. It's not guaranteed that that's what they're going to ask you for, but it's a decent bet. Um, Excuse me. So again, that's why I highlighted it. Yeah, but you don't um, need to have a particularly special certification to be a wholesaler. You just have to meet certain requirements, but they're often not an issue for the smaller growers or suppliers. Um, I see a question here in the chat. What advice do you have for educators or organizations working directly with farmers who are interested in increasing market readiness, including food safety certs? I think honestly, with that question, the number one thing is helping growers have a shared baseline of food safety knowledge, and then when they're ready to go get that cert, they want to grow their business, they understand why it's meaningful and important to them. I'll be totally transparent. You know, I've been working in the food safety space coming up on 3 years now, but when I was just farming, I had some pretty good teachers when I was learning to farm, first generation farmer myself, but I never had anyone stop me and say, "You're washing your hands before you go harvest to make sure that you're not contaminating the produce." No one ever explained to me that that's why they were telling me to wash my hands. No one ever explained that we were putting a sanitizer in our wash water to prevent cross contamination. And like my biology, even as someone who's interested in farming and ecology and soil science, is not super strong. So I didn't understand, like, oh, well, there could be a pathogen, something nasty in your wash water, and you're trying to make sure that it doesn't come onto your produce as you're washing. And I think there are a lot of different resources, and I see Liz might be sharing these. I do encourage again that FSMA training, the Produce Safety Alliance grower training. It's a one-day thing. You get a big, I think I have mine on my desk because I always try to stay informed. You get a nice big handy spiral bound notebook. It's got all of your information in there, and things like a Produce Safety boot camp. Again, building that baseline of understanding, because I think especially like I mentioned, every small farm is unique, and a lot of growers might think, well, I don't need to really concern myself with food safety. Or you know, I'm pretty safe already, so why would I bother? But going to a one-day workshop or training is a really great way to help growers and help the folks that we're working with just get that shared baseline of knowledge, and then you can have a more in-depth conversation about what it means for their operation. And I'll give an example of a peer, although she's totally left me in the dust at this point. A woman that I was working with that started, she started on, I think, 1/8 of an acre in a backyard and her neighbors noticed that she was growing lots of good food, so they kept inviting her to grow in more and more backyards. And then she finally had enough money to buy 10 acres. And then a few years later, she scaled her business up to like 40 or 50 acres. Now she's on almost 100 acres. And so she went from maybe one farmer's market a week to now she is fully covered by the produce safety rule and gets a FSMA audit every year. So if you help folks get ready and they're interested to grow their business, which I know this woman that I worked with was, she had the food safety basics down. And then so when she needed to go get GAP and organic and then eventually a full audit, she was ready for all those steps, and it helped her grow her business seamlessly. I want to make sure I'm keeping up with the chat here. Oh, that is a really great resource that you just shared there, Liz, the produce safety tips from MSU. I really like that one.
I like that one. I can share a little background for people. So
Please.
if you click on the MSU link, that's like the bottom link in the chat. MSU has, really great program with outreach built around FSMA produce safety training. They have a great podcast called Produce Eats, and they bring on producers. They bring on their kind of food safety team for the state, which includes extension and like the Department of Ag staff, I think. And they give lots of perspective to help you kind of figure out like why this is great for your farm and how it really helps your farm. But the other element is this texting. And so you can sign up and get like a weekly text that gives you like a picture and just a really quick tip on, like, the last one that I got was about having chickens in your high tunnel, and the recommendation of keeping, even though it's great, like the chickens can go in and eat all the bugs, being mindful to keep our livestock that are producing raw manure separate from our crops that are producing what we eat. So again, they do a great visual. It's a quick thing. You get it once a week, and it's a good reminder. So yeah, check out some of those links if you're in Illinois and you need your FSMA training. Everything Local Conference next January has it. And the other one, if you're a newer, smaller grower, like maybe an urban grower or backyard, Illinois Extension also has the produce safety boot camp that they're just keeping open, that you can take that. It's not a certification. It's not FSMA level, but it'll give you a taste of what like produce safety is. So it's a good starting point.
Absolutely. And we actually just did a crossover food safety podcast episode with the folks at Michigan State. So I'll just drop a link to the food safety dish there as well. We appreciate them and the outreach that they do. That's a really lovely thing about working in the food safety space is I'm hearing these questions about technical assistance and education outreach. We might work in each of our individual states, but there's a big spirit of wanting to help all growers succeed, all producers succeed, and get access to the information that they need. So yeah. Well,
Is there somewhere where you can look up whether people have registrations or not? Is there like a list?
Yeah, I don't believe that there is. There may be state to state something where you can look something up, but I know, for instance, that I've tried to do some research on like, oh, who is registered to do cottage food here in Maryland, just because I'm a nerd like that and was curious about, I know a few producers just personally and I buy their stuff at the farmer's market, but I don't think that there's many places, states or local governments that keep that type of information publicly. And that is kind of a gap in the food safety regulatory space. I also understand that, there's some degree of, wanting, protected information and privacy, but it is a requirement to have, your farm's contact information and be able to, as I mentioned, like trace back in case there was ever a food safety, concern or outbreak. But yeah, not that I know of. Is there any sort of centralized way to look up, who has a GAP audit, who has a cottage food license or anything like that?
But isn't there that's public information though. You can get that probably from your public health department. It seems like, from my understanding, that anyone handling food or in a food operation type of situation, there is a sanitation management certification that
Mhm.
is issued. Uh, you have to renew it every 5 years. Those documents have to be publicly displayed.
Yes.
And you can also find that information from your local health department, because those are the individuals that do the inspection for those facilities that are distributing food. Even if it's at a farmer's market, you have to have that certificate available on you. That's why they give you a little bitty one to carry around in your pocket. But that documentation has to be available for the public.
That's right. And, that's an important point. We do also try to do some work with consumers to help them understand that a lot of the farmers that they're working with, or a lot of the, food producers that they're working with, are taking these steps to get, food safety certifications, to make sure that they have a healthy and reliable food supply. And we encourage folks to ask their farmers, do you have a food safety plan? If it's a cottage food operation, can I see your license or your certification to be a home food producer? Or do you have it displayed at your farmer's market booth? Because there's a value to that. I think it also helps you connect with buyers, even if it's just your one-to-one retail or CSA customer. I certainly know when I, run our CSA, I like our CSA members to know what we do in terms of safe and clean food production. And I think it gives them a sense of, safety and excitement that they have a, really robust farmer growing their food. And I hope that helps small farms in some aspect of their marketing.
We're gonna have time for one more question.
Yeah, one more question. And I see your comment there, Mabel. That's a great thing. Yeah, we really are thinking about it, and particularly check out our folks at the Missouri Farmers Union, who are working on some of that consumer outreach and educating folks about what the landscape looks like in terms of food safe practices on small farms.
I'll add one more comment to that question about, can you see like who is GAP certified? So this would be like a voluntary, farmers are listing the certifications that they have. If you're not familiar with Market Maker, which is a national program, but it's really focused kind of state by state. And it's focused on farmers being able to connect with markets, either direct consumer markets or wholesale and aggregators. So farmers can set up a free account, and then you can put in, what your operation is, what you're growing, the markets you're selling to, and then your certification. So people will put like, if they have GAP certification on there. So it's not something that, they're not being checked or verified in that system. It's just kind of a networking piece. But that could give you an idea of, who maybe is in your area that is already working in GAP certification, if you have questions or trying to reach out to them. Because working with the health department sometimes can be a little tricky. So I can share a link to Illinois Market Maker if you're interested, because that's the one I'm familiar with.
And I'm just going to put my contact info in the chat again. Sincerely, please do reach out if you want to ask some more specific questions, or if we can link you up with something that will help your operation. And really appreciate everyone's time. This is a really fantastic event. I'm grateful to being invited by the good folks at Chicago Food Policy Action Council to talk today.